Earlier that morning, from the quiet of his corner office overlooking the city, Elijah Cole reviewed the latest customer satisfaction scores for First Capital Bank. The numbers were troubling. As the CEO of the parent company, Cole Financial Group, he knew that spreadsheets and reports only told half the story. There was a disconnect he couldn't pinpoint from 30 floors up. "I need to see it for myself," he said to his executive assistant. "Cancel my meetings. I'm going in." 20 minutes later, the transformation was complete. The tailored suit was gone, replaced by a simple black hoodie and worn jeans. His luxury watch was tucked away, and a plain black cap was pulled low over his eyes. He was no longer Elijah Cole, billionaire CEO. He was just a man walking into a bank. The moment he stepped through the glass doors of the Westlake branch, he felt it, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The security guard, previously relaxed, straightened his posture, his eyes tracking Elijah's path across the marble floor. A pair of elderly customers clutched their purses a little tighter. It was a language spoken without words, and Elijah understood it perfectly. He approached the first available teller, a young woman named Jessica. "Good morning," he said with a pleasant smile. "I'd like to make a withdrawal." Jessica's eyes flicked from his face to his hoodie, then to her screen. "Do you have an account with us, sir?" The slight emphasis on "sir" was not lost on him. "Yes, I do." He slid his debit card and driver's license across the counter. "I need to withdraw $25,000. It's for a community project I'm funding." Jessica stared at the number on her monitor, then at his ID, her surprise evident. The balance was far more than she expected. "One moment, please," she stammered, reaching for the phone. I'll need to get approval for a withdrawal of this size." Within a minute, Victoria Harlow, the branch manager, emerged from her office. Her heels clicked with aggressive authority on the polished floor. Everything about her, from her perfectly coiffed hair to her immaculate navy suit, radiated control. "Good morning, sir," she began, her tone a veneer of professional courtesy. "I'm Victoria Harlow, the branch manager. I understand you're requesting a significant withdrawal?" Elijah nodded. "That's correct. 25,000. Victoria picked up his license, studying it with exaggerated care. Her eyes darted between the photo and the man in the hoodie standing before her. "Mr. Cole," she said, drawing out his name, "withdrawals over $10,000 require additional verification. It's bank policy." "I understand," Elijah said calmly. "I'm happy to provide whatever is necessary. I also know your website states that branches maintain sufficient funds for withdrawals up to $50,000 without prior notice." Victoria's professional smile tightened. She hadn't expected him to be familiar with their policies. "While that is technically true," she conceded, "we still need to verify that you are who you claim to be, and that these funds were obtained legitimately." There it was. The insinuation, hanging in the air like a foul odor. How could someone who looked like him have legitimate access to that kind of money? "I've provided 2 forms of ID, Elijah said, his composure unwavering as he produced his passport. "The account number is correct, and the signature matches. Is there another issue I should be aware of?" Victoria's patience snapped. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Sir, let's be frank. We don't serve people like you here. You're wearing a hoodie in a bank. People who make legitimate large withdrawals don't typically dress like this." Her gaze swept over him with open disdain. "Perhaps you're confused about the amount in your account." The security guard had inched closer, his hand now resting on his belt. Other customers were openly staring, the branch floor transformed into a silent theater of judgment. "So, if I had come in wearing a suit and tie," Elijah asked, his voice dangerously quiet, "would we still be having this conversation?" "Sir, your tone is becoming inappropriate," Victoria retorted, her professional veneer cracking. "If you continue, I will have to ask you to leave." She glanced pointedly at the guard. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor," Elijah said. A triumphant smirk touched Victoria's lips. "I am the branch manager. There is no one else here for you to speak to." Elijah held her gaze for 3 excruciating seconds. Then, without a word, he took out his phone. Victoria assumed he was admitting defeat. Instead, he dialed a number from memory. "Sarah, it's Elijah," he said, his eyes locked on Victoria's. "Connect me with Thomas Reynolds immediately." The name, that of the regional director for all branches in the state, meant nothing to Victoria. Yet. A moment later, Elijah's voice shifted, acquiring the sharp, commanding edge of a boardroom executive. Tom, I'm at the Westlake branch conducting an unannounced service audit. I need you to come here now and bring the last 3 months of customer complaint records with you. Yes, particularly those regarding denial of service. And Tom, no calls ahead. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Victoria's face had drained of all color. The security guard took an instinctive step back. I don't know who you think you called, she began, her voice suddenly uncertain, but our regional management doesn't operate that way. In approximately 7 minutes, Ms. Harlow, Elijah said, his voice level, your regional director will walk through those doors. Every word of our interaction has been recorded by that security camera. He gestured to the corner of the ceiling. Every assumption you made based on my appearance, every policy you chose to selectively enforce. Perhaps before he arrives, you should reconsider whether my hoodie was ever the real problem. The game had just changed. What Victoria Harlow couldn't possibly imagine was that her career, as she knew it, was already over. At Reynolds' fingertips, the digital records coalesced. Within moments, a deeply troubling pattern surfaced. 7 formal complaints, each detailing prejudicial handling of their accounts. Each came from a customer of color or from a less affluent neighborhood, and every single one had crossed Victoria's desk, only to be dismissed as a simple misunderstanding or a necessary security protocol. Elijah studied the data, his expression unreadable, then slowly raised his eyes to Victoria. This doesn't appear to be an isolated incident, Ms. Harlow. This is a pattern. This was the very systemic inequality Elijah had vowed to dismantle when he acquired First Capital Bank. His mission was never just about adding another institution to his portfolio. It was about fundamentally transforming the world of banking for the communities that had been left behind. Around the conference table, the regional management team sat in a tense, uncomfortable silence. The irony was lost on no one. Elijah Cole, still in his black hoodie, now occupied the executive chair at the head of the table. Victoria Harlow, meanwhile, sat rigidly in a visitor's chair. Her perfect posture, once a symbol of authority, now a brittle defense. Thomas Reynolds had been joined by the district operations manager and the head of human resources, both of whom had arrived breathless and wide-eyed after receiving urgent summons. The air was heavy, thick with the weight of the security footage they had all just witnessed. Elijah placed a tablet on the polished table, its screen glowing with the First Capital Bank policy manual. He still wore the black hoodie, a silent, deliberate choice that made Victoria's earlier remarks about proper attire hang in the air like a bad debt. Section 3.1 of our customer service standards, Elijah began, his voice measured and clear. Would someone please read it aloud? Reynolds cleared his throat. First Capital Bank is committed to providing exceptional service to all customers regardless of appearance, background, or transaction size. Our core values prioritize dignity, respect, and equality in every interaction. Thank you, Elijah said, swiping to the next page. And our verification protocols for large withdrawals? The operations manager spoke, her voice strained. 2 forms of valid government ID are required for transactions over $10,000, along with standard CTR filing. Any additional verification is based strictly on regulatory requirements, not on a subjective assessment of the customer. Elijah nodded, setting the tablet down. Now, let's discuss what happened today, and more importantly, what has been happening at this branch for a very long time. He brought up a new screen, a dashboard of customer satisfaction metrics, complaint logs, and service ratings, all broken down by demographics. The data told an undeniable story of unequal service. This isn't about one incident, Elijah stated, his gaze fixed on Victoria. This is about a pattern of behavior that violates the very soul of what this bank should stand for. Victoria leaned forward, a final, desperate attempt to salvage her career. Mr. Cole, if I could explain, banking security requires a certain level of discretion. Statistical patterns in fraud cases show— Ms. Harlow, Elijah interrupted, his voice calm but unyielding. I am intimately familiar with banking security. I wrote many of the protocols we use. What you demonstrated today was not security. It was prejudice. He turned back to the tablet, which now displayed a split screen of security footage. These are 8 different customers from the past month. 4 in business suits, 4 in casual clothes. The difference in how they were treated is stark. the footage was damning. Customers in suits were met with smiles and expedited service. Those in casual attire, especially people of color, faced heightened scrutiny, long delays, and thinly veiled suspicion. "The numbers don't lie," Elijah continued, his voice cutting through the silence. "When we control for every variable, transaction type, amount, time of day, customers in casual clothes at this branch wait an average of 12 minutes longer. If they are also a person of color, that wait time extends to 19 minutes. This isn't a coincidence. It's not a security measure. It is a culture of bias that has been allowed to fester under your leadership, Ms. Harlow." Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but faltered as Elijah held up a hand. "I didn't build this company. I didn't acquire this bank, only to see it perpetuate the same walls of prejudice I had to climb as a young man. Every single person who walks through these doors deserves equal treatment, equal respect, and equal access to their own money." He turned to the HR director. "Ms. Harlow's employment is terminated, effective immediately." A gasp escaped Victoria's lips. "You can't just—" "I can, and I have," Elijah stated firmly. "Banking is built on trust. Our customers must trust us, and I must trust the people who represent this institution. Today, that trust has been irrevocably broken." Victoria was escorted to her office to clear her desk. The career she had built at First Capital Bank was dismantled in less time than she had spent denying Elijah his own money. In the lobby, Elijah addressed the remaining staff. He stood before them in his hoodie, the same man they had regarded with suspicion less than an hour ago. "Today marks a turning point for this branch," he announced. "Beginning next week, every employee will undergo an enhanced bias and sensitivity training program. We will implement new service metrics that track equitable treatment, and most importantly, we are launching a new community banking initiative specifically focused on reaching underserved neighborhoods." He paused, his eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. "You will judge customers by the content of their accounts, not by the clothes on their backs. That is not just a moral imperative. As of today, it is your job description." Later that afternoon, Elijah personally completed his withdrawal, the same transaction Victoria had refused. He was still wearing the hoodie, still the same person, but he was now treated with a deference reserved for a CEO. As the teller counted out the $25,000, he noticed her hands were trembling slightly. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Jessica, sir," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "Jessica," he said, "I'm not here to punish people. I'm here to fix a system. We all have biases. The key is to recognize them and actively work to overcome them." She nodded, a wave of relief washing over her face. "This money," Elijah explained, "is for the East Side Education Center's new computer lab. Would you like to come with me to deliver it? To see firsthand the impact we can have when we serve all our communities equally?" An hour later, Elijah stood in the community center, surrounded by the joyous sounds of children marveling at the prospect of new computers. The center's director was floored that their grant had been approved so quickly and delivered in person by the CEO, who was dressed no differently than many of the kids he was there to help. "Why did you do it this way?" the director asked quietly. "You could have just sent a check." Elijah watched the children, seeing in their hopeful faces a reflection of his younger self. "Because dignity isn't just about giving people money," he said. "It's about showing them respect, regardless of what they wear, where they live, or how they look." He glanced over at Jessica, who was now helping a young girl navigate a simple coding program on a tablet. And sometimes, the most important lessons are learned when you're reminded of what it feels like to be denied that respect. In the weeks that followed, First Capital Bank rolled out the most comprehensive equity and inclusion program in the industry. The Hoodie incident, as it became known internally, was transformed into a powerful case study on bias that every new employee learned about during their orientation. More importantly, First Capital became known as the bank where everyone received the same respectful service. Their community initiatives flourished, loan approval rates equalized across all demographics, and profitability soared as new customers flocked to a bank that truly lived its values. Because, in the end, dignity and respect are not just moral principles. They are good business. And sometimes the most powerful statement a CEO can make is to simply show up in a hoodie and demand to be treated like everyone else. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing it so that others can be part of the conversation. We'll see you in the next video.